Jazz swallowed. "You can't kill me," he said. He wanted to blurt it out, to scream it, to cry. But he knew that human weakness was like an aphrodisiac in a sociopath such as the Impressionist. "If you try, you'll fail. I'm Billy Dent's son. I can't be killed." A bluff. An insane bluff that wouldn't work on anyone with even a shred of intact brain power. But the Impressionist was a madman who believed he was a god, so... The Impressionist blinked, and in a moment his wicked expression fell into abject innocence. An innocence so real that for a moment Jazz felt guilty for accusing the man at all. "Kill you? Why on earth... Is that what you think? That I want to kill you? No, of course not. I would never." He dropped to his knees in front of Jazz and gazed earnestly into his eyes. "I want to improve you. I want you to stride this earth like the murderer god you're meant to be, like the creature your father wanted to create. I'm not going to kill you. I'm going to help you. I'm going to help you fulfill your first kill." And with that, the Impressionist turned the chair so that Jazz could see his bed. Lying on it was his grandmother. She was still alive. Jazz could hear the slight cessation of her breathing. The trank he'd given her would have kept her out for hours, and who knew if the Impressionist had given her a booster shot from his own stash. "I killed my father when I was 15, the Impressionist said. "Trust me when I say, Jasper, that you have no idea how liberating it is to cut, literally, your ties to your past. It's a glorious thing." "I won't do it," Jazz said. "Of course you will. If Billy Dent were here, he would want you to do it. He would gladly let you kill him, knowing that it would ignite your path to glory." Jazz thought of Billy in prison, gesturing to the universe and saying, "And destroy all of this?" when asked why he hadn't committed suicide. "You don't know anything about my father," he said, and then some strange combination of panic and fear and guilt and... He couldn't believe it. Filial honor took him over and he blurted out, "You don't know anything about him. You're some psychopathetic fanboy who's such a loser that he has to pretend to be my father in order to give meaning to his life. You're nothing. You're not a god. You're nothing. You couldn't even get it up to rape Irene Heller." He scored. The Impressionist's left eyelid twitched, though the rest of his face remained serene even as he backhanded Jazz across the face with a blow so powerful that Jazz wouldn't have been surprised if he'd lost a molar. "I'm not afraid of you," the Impressionist said, leaning in close. "I could worship you, but I will never fear you. Do you understand?" He held up the knife between them. Jazz caught his reflection in the blade and was astonished to see that he did not look in the least bit afraid. "Then I'm one up on you," Jazz said, his head spinning from the force of the blow and the taste of his own blood, "because I'm also not afraid of you, and I'll never worship you." With a strangled cry, the Impressionist grabbed Jazz's collar with his free hand, jerking him forward, but the shirt was thin and old. It split down the middle from the force of the tug. The Impressionist laughed and twisted his arm, ripping the shirt apart so that it hung in 3 big folds down around Jazz's waist. "Get your kicks like this?" Jazz taunted. "Is that why you couldn't rape Irene Heller?" But the Impressionist wasn't paying attention. He'd caught notice of something, and after craning his neck to look behind Jazz, moved around the chair so that he had a view of Jazz's back. "Yosemite Sam?" he said in a perplexed voice. "Don't you think it's time to grow up?" It could have been worse. Howie wanted SpongeBob SquarePants, but I talked him into something at least a little bit tough. "This has all been fun." The Impressionist came back around to face Jazz, "but we have much to do before the night is over, and we need to start now." The Impressionist came at Jazz, and Jazz tensed, ready for the knife blade. But all the man did was unlock Jazz's ankles from the chair, then quickly cut them together. He did the same with his hands, first unshackling the right wrist from the chair, then recuffing it to the left before unshackling that one. Jazz was free to stand, to hobble. Could he escape? Impossible. He couldn't move more than 6 inches at a time. His hands were practically glued together. The Impressionist hauled him out of the chair and half marched, half dragged him over to Grandma. Jaz's head spun, still dizzy from the drugs. Jaz felt the knife forced into his hands. Hold it tight. And then his hands pressed around the grip. The Impressionist's strength was impressive. With one hand, he was keeping Jaz's grip tight on the knife handle and preventing Jaz from jerking the knife into the Impressionist. A knife. Another knife so familiar. And Jaz knew in that moment, it wasn't just a dream. It was a memory. He'd held a knife before like this, exactly like this, hands on his own, guiding him. But it was his own hands on the handle, just like before. The Impressionist maneuvered Jaz with his other hand on his back, forcing him closer to Grandma, who snored and twitched unaware. "This is your first one," the Impressionist said, "so I want to be easy on you. She's not waking up any time soon. Hell," he chuckled, "she's not waking up, period. So, here we go." He positioned Jaz so that he was leaning toward Grandma, the point of the knife dimpling her dress between and slightly under her deflated breasts. "All you need to do," the Impressionist whispered, "is put your weight into it. The knife will slip right under the sternum and slide into her heart. She's old, weak, frail. It'll be quick. She won't even really feel it if that's what you're worried about. After this, you'll feel so much better. Then we can go get your girlfriend." "No," Jaz whispered. There was still a very dark, very disturbed, and very real part of him that wanted his grandmother dead. But he would be damned if he would let this man force him to do it. He would be damned if he would allow it to happen like this. "I won't." "You will," the Impressionist whispered, his voice more seductive than any siren. "You want to. You will." His breath warm and gentle in Jaz's ear, his words soft. "You will. And if you don't?" "And if I don't?" If he didn't, she would be dead soon anyway. She was an old woman in poor health with a brain that hardly worked, and her only help was a grandson who frequently drugged her and left her unattended. Would it really hurt anyone if he did it? If he removed her from the world? Who would miss her? No one, that's who. He was about to be taken from her anyway, thanks to Melissa Hoover and social services, and Grandma would prefer death to an old age home. Right? Like chicken. Like cutting into chicken, that's all it is, like chicken. She would die soon anyway, he reminded himself, and once he killed her, the Impressionist would unlock the cuffs, would trust him, and Jaz he would take advantage of that trust, keep the knife, let the Impressionist think he'd won, and then kill the Impressionist. Yes. Jaz's heartbeat accelerated as though someone had stomped on the gas pedal connected to his heart. Yes, that would work. He could see it now. Grandma wouldn't even be finished bleeding out when he would turn on the Impressionist, who wouldn't see it coming and do exactly as Billy had taught him. One quick thrust into the heart, a twist to the left, or if the angles were wrong, slash across the carotid, where it pushed fat and juicy on the side of the neck. So tempting, so easy. Like God wants us to cut it, Billy used to say. That. No. He blinked fiercely until he no longer saw a useless old woman in front of him, but rather his grandmother. What had happened to him? No, no. Had he really just been contemplating, anticipating, joyfully committing 2 murders in a matter of minutes? I won't. Jaz was more trying to convince himself than deny the Impressionist. If you don't, Jaz, then I will. The words hard now, the once gentle breath coming, fast and harsh. I'll let her wake up and I'll start with the eyes. For her, I'll be the artist and Green Jack and gentle killer and hand in glove all rolled into one. And we'll see how long Granny can last when I start taking pieces and parts away. Won't we? Just then Jaz saw something. Something the Impressionist couldn't see because he was staring at Jaz. Shadows. shadows moving in the light spilling under the door from the hallway. Someone was out there. "Help!" Jas cried before he could change his mind. "Help me!" The Impressionist snickered. "I told you before, no one can—" He broke off as someone from the hallway thumped against the door. "What the hell?" He looked over at the door, his hands still tight on Jas, leaving him no room to maneuver. Then a familiar voice said, "Try again," in a high note of panic, and Jas found that he could twist just enough. The knife point dragged and caught, slicing Grandma's dress open, but then it came free and up as Jas pivoted. He missed the Impressionist with the knife, but managed to land a double-handed blow against the man's jaw, which rocked him back on his heels and made him take a step away. Jas hopped backward, looking for a better angle to slash with the knife, but he tripped over his own feet and fell, the knife clattering from his hands. It bounced once and landed a couple of feet away. He lunged for it, corkscrewing his body, straining against his bonds to reach out with both hands, just as the Impressionist pounced on him and pinned him to the carpet. "Don't even," the Impressionist started, and then broke off with a howl of pain as Jas craned his neck and bit deep into the man's wrist. His teeth scraped against bone, and the taste of blood filled his mouth. The door thumped again and then exploded open. Out of the corner of his eye, Jas saw Connie and Howie spill into the room. Howie, unbelievably, wielded a shotgun, looking like the world's most improbable action hero. Still entangled with Jas, the Impressionist ripped his arm out of Jas's mouth. Blood spurted. The Impressionist twisted and reached for the knife. Connie kicked it away. And then suddenly, Howie stood over them, the shotgun leveled without so much as a tremble, at the Impressionist's head. "Watch it, man," Howie snarled. "If you're not careful, I will bleed all over you." Jas couldn't help it. He started laughing. Jas rubbed feeling back into his wrists and ankles. Connie was wrapping a hand towel from the bathroom around the Impressionist's wound. The Impressionist, shackled to the same chair he'd bound Jas to and with the same cuffs he'd used on Jas, stared straight ahead impassively. Howie stood guard with the shotgun. "He's really bleeding," Connie said. "We should call 911 again and tell them we need an ambulance, too." "Let him bleed," Howie said, in a stone-cold tone Jas had never heard from him before. "Watch him," Jas said, heading for the bedroom door. "I want a couple of minutes with him before the cops get here." Jas disappeared down the hall into the bathroom and slurped water from the sink, then spit it out. No matter what he did, he could still taste the Impressionist's flesh and blood on his tongue. He wondered how long it would take to lose that taste. He felt infected. He went back to the bedroom. Howie and Connie still stood guard over the Impressionist, who simply stared straight ahead. "How did you guys get here, anyway?" Connie stepped back from the Impressionist and shrugged, as though she knew her makeshift bandage wasn't the best, but didn't really care. "Howie couldn't sleep at home. Called and made me come get him, or else he says he would have walked the whole way. We got here and the cop was—" Howie broke off, swallowing hard. "Not doing his job very well," the Impressionist said. Howie surprised Jas with the savage swing of the shotgun. It was poorly aimed. He missed the killer's face and clipped his shoulder instead, but it was a solid hit, and the Impressionist nearly toppled over in the chair. "Shut up!" Howie screamed. "Shut up! You killed him! You almost killed me! I'll cut deeper next time, bleeder." Jas snatched away the shotgun before Howie could brain the Impressionist into a coma. He needed the man alive. For now. Howie retreated to the other side of the room, breathing hard. "We tried G. William, but couldn't get him. So we called 911, Connie said, picking up from where Howie had left off. And they promised to hurry, but dispatch is all screwed up and everyone's all crazy. Because of the task force," Howie continued, "and because everyone scrambled to snap up this guy." He jerked his head at the Impressionist, "at the next victim's house." "Right. So we came inside, found the gun, right near the grandfather clock," Connie said, nodding.